Walt Disney Company is one of the biggest media and entertainment corporations in the world, and the multinational continues to generate billions in global revenue every year. But have you ever wondered how it all got started? For almost a century now, the name Walt Disney has been synonymous with animated films, television channels, and the happiest place on earth, aka Disneyland. So it's easy to forget that at one time, the name referred to an actual person. Born in 1901 and rising from humble roots, Walter Elias Walt Disney was one of America's most preeminent business tycoons. Often dubbed the father of Mickey Mouse, he knew that true success begins with creative power. His work is nothing less than legendary, and his unparalleled vision continues to inspire generation after generation. Not bad for a paperboy from Chicago, whose road to success was paved with countless business failures and setbacks. By the end of this video, you will be amazed by all that he did, and you will certainly feel inspired to make your own wildest dream come true as well. Ready to learn more about how this persistent and innovative animator went on to become one of the most inspiring entrepreneurs on the planet? Then keep watching. Born in Chicago in 1901 and raised in Missouri, Walter Elias Disney was the fourth son among 5 siblings. His family was of Irish, Canadian, German, and American descent, and they often struggled to make ends meet. While Walt loved his mother dearly, his relationship with his father was less loving, as he was an abusive and domineering figure who unsuccessfully tried to provide for the family. To escape from his stressful circumstances, young Walt found solace in drawing. When he was just 4 years old, his creative talent was ignited by a neighborhood doctor who requested him to draw his horse. Little Walt instantly fell in love with art, and he steadily advanced his skills by imitating the cartoons in his father's newspaper. Around the age of 7, he started to support himself and his struggling family by selling his drawings to neighbors and family friends. When he turned 10, Walt and his family moved to Kansas City, where his uncle employed him to sell snacks and newspapers along the railroad during summers. Young Walt found it was fascinating to be amongst trains, and this adoration can still be seen in his theme parks today. During the rest of the year, Walt would wake up at 4:30 every morning with his brother Roy to deliver the newspaper before school. They would make another paper round after school as well. As you can imagine, the job was very exhausting, and Walt would often fall asleep in class. But to help his family, he continued his paper route for more than 6 years. In high school, Walt continued developing his artistic skills, and he regularly drew patriotic pictures about World War I for the school newspaper. To further broaden his skills, he took evening illustration courses at the Chicago Academy of Fine Arts. But the situation at home was still tense. One by one, young Walt watched his older brothers run away from home to escape their abusive father. He wanted to follow suit, and at 16, a shy yet determined Walt dropped out of high school and tried to join the army in their fight against the Germans. Anything seemed like a better option than staying at home with his father. But since he was still under the minimum age of 17, he was rejected. Not one to easily give up, Walt decided to try again. He forged a birth certificate, lied about his age, and enlisted for the Red Cross. This time, he was accepted, and soon after, he was shipped to France, where he spent the following year driving an ambulance. After his time in the Army, he returned to Kansas City with the goal of becoming a newspaper artist. His brother Roy got him a job at the Pessman Rubin Art Studio, where he met Iwerks, a fellow cartoonist there. But not even a year had passed when a sharp decline in revenue led to Walt losing his job. The reason that was given was his supposed lack of imagination. These words would have probably discouraged many aspiring artists, but not Walt. With unwavering optimism and the support of his new friend he opened his very first business, Iwerks Disney Commercial Artists. Sadly, they failed to attract enough customers and the business collapsed after only a month. Walt was dismayed, but far from ready to quit on his dream. As determined as he was to achieve his goals, Walt knew that simply believing in himself wouldn't get him anywhere without the money to fund it. So he got a job at the Kansas City Film Ad Company, where he produced short films using cutout animation. Meanwhile, at home, he began to experiment with a different animation technique using a borrowed camera and book. Later on, he tried to convince the ad agency to adopt this new technique, but they were not interested. Itching to set off on his own, Walt soon decided it was time to quit talking and start doing. He left the agency and opened his second business. Together with his older brother Roy, he launched Laugh-O-Gram Studio in 1920. It was a cartoon business, and for many months, Walt, Ub, and a handful of animators worked long hours to produce short cartoons. These 7-minute animations of modernized fairy tales were shown at the local theater, and they attracted enough attention and popularity to keep their business afloat. Unfortunately, funding soon began to decline, and Walt was hurrying to write the story of a live-action girl called Alice exploring an animated wonderland. But before he could finish it, his company went bankrupt, and he was, once again, left with close to nothing. At 22 years old and already with 2 failed business ventures under his belt, Walt felt the only way he would succeed is if he believed in his dream implicitly and unquestionably. He then packed his suitcase and made the trip to Hollywood. A whole new chapter in his life was about to begin. He made his way to Los Angeles to try his hand at acting, but he failed at that too. Still, there was a silver lining to his move. Noticing there weren't any animation studios in California, he convinced his brother Roy to join him so they could set up their own shop in their uncle's garage. Day after day, he was contacting studios in an effort to sell his Alice in Cartoonland series. But he was rejected time and time again, until one day, a New York cartoon distributor, Margaret J. Winkler, accepted his offer. She was looking for a fresh series and liked the idea of a cartoon featuring a real girl. Walt and Roy were ecstatic, and they immediately moved their operation to a rented room at the back of a real estate office. Walt took charge of animation while Roy operated a second-hand camera. The rental was small and they lacked employees, but the front door proudly read Disney Brothers Studio. Alice and her cartoon world were well received, which allowed the studio to hire more animators. Walt's first hires included his friend Ub and an inker who Walt would later marry. Their studio went on to create more animated shorts and later gave life to a cheerful character called Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. Oswald became Walt's first major success. But while his rabbit became a huge star, Walt himself would find his luck had run out. 5 years after Oswald's creation, Walt attempted to negotiate a higher fee for the series, only to discover that the distributor wanted to pay less. Traveling to New York to renegotiate his contract, he learned that his producer had taken his team of animators from under him and that he no longer had any legal rights to Oswald. Instead of receiving the raise he deserved, Walt was now faced with the ultimatum of accepting a reduced fee for his work or leaving. Most people would have been furious and started plotting their revenge there and then. But instead of fighting the loss, Walt decided to walk away and start over again. It was on the train ride back to California that he created the mouse that would change his life forever. At 27 years old, a disillusioned Walt stared blankly out the window while an idea was forming in his relentless mind. He dug around for his notepad and fervently started sketching. The result was Mortimer the Mouse, later baptized as Mickey by Walt's wife. This character was special. He was more human, adventurous, and hugely optimistic, much like Walt Disney himself. Walt's team was on board with this new cartoon, but would audiences like him too? After years of driving up his debts, Walt finally brought Mickey Mouse to life on film starting in the late 1920s. Through Mickey, he eventually earned his way back to the top of his industry. But that wasn't easy. Many found the idea absurd, and he got rejected over 300 times before someone said yes. Mickey Mouse first appeared in 2 silent films, which both failed to find distribution. Unfortunate, but used to setbacks now, Walt knew better than to simply give up. Instead, he and his team decided to create a 3rd film, this time with synchronized sound. With Ub in charge of animation and Walt lending his own voice as Mickey's, it was the first ever sound cartoon, and it became an instant sensation. The reviews were glowing, and plans of Mickey merchandise began to bloom. Soon enough, film studios started lining up with all sorts of deals. But from experience, Walt knew he would never sell the rights to his prized mouse. Along with his team, he formed Disney Studios, and they went on to create a series of sound cartoons which soon flickered across televisions all over the country. But even with the success of Mickey Mouse, Walt still faced challenges in keeping his business afloat. He was overworked and eventually suffered a nervous breakdown. After taking time off with his wife to recuperate, he returned with a bold new idea. He wanted to push the limits of animation and announced the development of a full-length animation feature, which he called Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. Everyone thought it was a terrible idea. His wife and brother tried to talk him out of it, but Walt stubbornly took out multiple bank loans and spent the next 3 years producing his vision. His very own team thought the film would ruin Disney Studios, yet Walt persevered. And in 1937, the film became the most successful motion picture of the year. It won dozens of awards and turned enough profit to pay off every bank loan and then some. It seemed like all his work had finally paid off. This goes to show that dreaming big can sometimes lead to beautiful results. Success begins with creative power, and if you can dream it, you can do it. Of course, money plays a role, but your commitment to your work is what will eventually decide your future. For years onward, Disney Studios produced several animated films and countless iconic characters. But Walt was more a true workaholic dreamer, and his mind was brimming with even more ambitious ideas. Over the years, he had learned to diversify his business by turning to television, despite pressures from the film studios to stay on the big screen. Speaking of diversifying, Walt said the following:
I think as much animated cartoon as I've ever done. The only thing is I diversified.
His gamble paid off, and with the success of TV shows like The Mickey Mouse Club and Davy Crockett, he harnessed enough capital to launch his biggest venture yet, Disneyland. On one particular Saturday with his daughters, Walt sat on a park bench while his girls played on the merry-go-round. As he watched them, he began to daydream of a place where parents and children could have fun together. He wanted it to be the happiest place on earth, and he envisioned people of all ages exploring and reveling in fantastical experiences. In 1954, the first Disneyland opened its doors to thousands of a waiting public.
To all who come to this happy place, welcome. Disneyland is your land.
And despite the counterfeit tickets and abounding technical difficulties, it was an instant success. There is a famous quote that says, "Do what you love, and you will never work a day in your life." Well, this is a good example of that. Disneyland was truly a work of love, and Walt didn't get into it with just the idea of making money. Instead, he simply wanted to create a magical place filled with happy, smiling people. Now over 50 years old, Walt had finally made his wildest dreams come true. His animation companies were flourishing, his characters were loved by many, and his productions were crossing borders into other countries. He had successfully transformed the entertainment industry and delighted people of all ages with his extraordinary vision. And in 1961, he made another lifelong dream come true and founded his very own art school, the California Institute of Arts, or CalArts. The school was created specifically for students of visual and performing arts, and at the time, it was the first degree-granting higher education institution of its kind. In this clip, he explains why the art school was created.
I put all my artists back in school. The art schools that existed then.
This is yet another valuable tip. Investing in knowledge is never a bad idea. Through his art school, Walt wanted to nurture future generations of creative talent, which he could then employ. And as he was not a fan of traditional university conventions, he aimed to create a multidisciplinary community of the arts built around the real-life experience of working artists. The school removed the walls separating the different creative disciplines and encouraged artists from different branches to mix and collaborate as a way of sparking new ideas and methods. And it was truly the place to be for any creative artist at the time. Running a school was already quite an endeavor, but not one to sit still. It wasn't long before Walt began plans for yet another new theme park. Sadly, before construction was complete, his lifelong habit of chain smoking had finally caught up with him. And in 1966, he passed away from lung cancer. However, his unfinished venture was not lost, and his brother Roy continued working on the theme park, which opened in 1971 under the name Walt Disney World. Regardless of how many years have passed since his death, Walt Disney continues to live on as a central figure in the history of animation. His school is renowned internationally as a game changer in the education of professional artists, and the Institute and its alumni have helped fuel the rise of a multifaceted LA creative scene that is among the most dynamic in the world. By the time he died, he not only built himself a legacy, but also an entire empire. He pioneered animations, created spellbinding theme parks, and went on to influence countless fields throughout his life, such as robotics and transportation. Within his short but unforgettable time on this planet, he became a beloved animator, producer, director, screenwriter, and voice actor. And although his reputation has changed over the years, he remains known as a cultural influencer worldwide. This was the story of a hardworking paperboy who built a billion-dollar legacy and continues to put smiles on people's faces every single day. Although he died more than 5 decades ago, his vision and unfailing pursuit of his dreams continue to be inspirational to this day, and we can definitely learn a thing or two from him. We hope you've been inspired. Which of the 4 tips that we discussed is your favorite? Share it in the comments, and don't forget to check out our channel for more inspiring and educational business stories.